January 2026. The White House is celebrating. From the Oval Office to the corridors of the Pentagon, the message is being broadcast on every channel in every language. Mission accomplished. Venezuela is open for business. The largest oil reserves on the planet are finally back in American hands. Donald Trump stands at the podium, flanked by smiling generals and relieved diplomats. He speaks with his trademark confidence about a new golden age of American energy dominance. He paints a picture of gas prices dropping to $2 a gallon. He describes fleets of American tankers heading south to rebuild a broken nation and bring wealth back to the U.S. Treasury. It is a compelling story. It is the story that the voters wanted to hear. But if you turn off the TV, if you ignore the speeches and the applause, and you tune into the frequency of the global markets, you will hear something terrifying. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. Where are the press releases from ExxonMobil announcing their return to the Orinoco Belt? Where are the multi-billion-dollar investment plans from Chevron? Where are the job postings for engineers to deploy to Maracaibo? They are nowhere to be seen. In the glass skyscrapers of Houston and the mahogany boardrooms of Wall Street, there is no celebration today. There is panic. There is anger. And there is a cold, hard realization that the United States government has just walked into the biggest financial trap in modern history. While Trump sees a military victory, the CEOs of big oil see a legal nightmare. They see a poisoned well, and they are quietly, privately, but firmly telling the White House, we are not going in. This is the story of the silent revolt. The story of how American capitalism is saying no to American imperialism. Because, in the world of high finance, a military victory is worthless if the math doesn't add up. And right now, the math in Venezuela is a disaster. In this video, we are going to expose the hidden conflict that the mainstream news isn't covering. The war between Washington's political ambition and Wall Street's cold reality. We will explain why the U.S. intervention is failing, not because of Russian tanks or guerrilla warfare, but because American corporations refuse to walk into a trap set by Beijing and Moscow 5 years ago. The Offsides trap. To understand why big oil is on strike, we have to understand the game they were playing versus the game that was actually rigged. For years, companies like Chevron, ExxonMobil, and ConocoPhillips have been lobbying for regime change in Venezuela. They wanted access to the heavy crude reserves that are essential for their refineries in the Gulf of Mexico. But they wanted it on their terms. They wanted a clean break. They expected a scenario like Iraq in 2003. They expected the U.S. Army to go in, dissolve the old government, wipe out the old laws, and present them with new contracts on a blank sheet of paper. That was the promise. That was the deal they thought they were getting. But that is not what happened. What they got instead was a dirty transition. When the U.S. military secured Caracas, they didn't find a blank sheet of paper. They found a spiderweb, a dense, unbreakable web of existing contracts. Liens, sovereign debts, and arbitration awards that are legally binding under international law. And the spider sitting in the middle of that web is not Nicolas Maduro. It is Russia, and it is China. Let's talk about the specific financial mechanism that caught the U.S. oil majors offside. It is called the cross-default clause. Most people have never heard of this term, but every energy lawyer in Houston knows it by heart, and it terrifies them. Here is how it works. Venezuela owes billions of dollars to creditors around the world. China alone holds an estimated $60 billion in debt through various state banks and funds. Russia holds billions more via state-backed loans and prepayments for oil. These loans are not just handshake deals between dictators. They are sophisticated financial instruments drafted by top lawyers in New York and London. And they are securitized by oil assets. Specifically, they are backed by the future production of PDVSA, the Venezuelan state oil company. The contracts contain a specific clause, the change of control provision. This states that if PDVSA changes ownership, or if the government tries to restructure the company without the creditor's permission, or if the oil exports are diverted to a third party, it triggers a cross default. This means the debt becomes due immediately. The entire $60 billion principal, plus interest, plus penalties. Right now, not in 10 years. Today, so put yourself in the shoes of the CEO of Chevron. Donald Trump calls you and says, "Go ahead, the fields are yours. Invest $10 billion to fix the pumps and start shipping oil to Texas." But your general counsel walks into your office, face pale, and says, "Sir, if we touch those pumps, China can legally claim that we are seizing their collateral. They can sue us in international court for the full value of the debt. They can seize our oil tankers in Singapore. They can freeze our corporate accounts in Europe. They can petition the courts to attach our assets globally. Would you sign that check? Would you risk your company's entire balance sheet to your stock price, your dividends, your reputation, a political promise? Of course not. Capital is cowardly. Capital hates risk. And right now, investing in Venezuela is not an investment. It is a gamble with odds that no sane businessman would accept. This is the Offsides trap. The U.S. military moved the line of scrimmage forward. They took the territory. But the corporate players are stuck back in the legal reality of 2025. They cannot move up the field without us getting penalized by the global financial referees. The poisoned well infrastructure lock. But the debt is just the first layer of the poison. The second layer is physical. It is about the nuts and bolts of the infrastructure itself. There is a myth in Washington, a dangerous fantasy, that Venezuela is a turnkey operation, that you just need to kick down the door, flip a switch, and the oil flows. This shows a complete lack of understanding of Venezuelan geology. The oil in the Orinoco Belt is not like the oil in Saudi Arabia or Texas. It is not light, sweet crude that bubbles up from the ground, ready to refine. It is extra heavy crude. It is basically sludge. It has the consistency of peanut butter or molasses. To move it through a pipeline, you have to heat it. You have to dilute it with chemicals. And most importantly, you have to process it through massive industrial facilities called upgraders. These upgraders turn the sludge into synthetic crude that can be exported. Without these upgraders, the oil is worthless. It stays in the ground. And here is the catch. Who owns the upgraders? Who holds the keys to the technology that makes the oil flow? In many critical cases, it is not the Venezuelan government. It is joint ventures with foreign powers. We talked about Russia's Rosneft in previous analyses. But let's look at the Chinese stake. China National Petroleum Corporation (CNPC) owns large stakes in the Sinavenza project and the Petrozamora project. These are massive operations. They control the blending facilities. They control the specialized pumping technology. If ExxonMobil wants to come in and save the industry, they cannot just take over these facilities. They have to work with CNPC. They have to sit at the same table. They have to share proprietary technology. They have to share profits. Can you imagine an American company under a Trump administration that is currently waging a fierce trade war with China, entering into a strategic partnership with a Chinese state-owned entity? It is politically impossible. The White House would block it. The U.S. Congress would investigate it. So, the U.S. companies are stuck in a paradoxical nightmare. They cannot work with the Russians and Chinese because of sanctions and politics. But they cannot work without them because the Russians and Chinese own the hardware. They own the physical keys to the upgraders. So, the well is effectively poisoned, not by chemicals, but by ownership structures. This creates a bizarre situation where the U.S. controls the surface territory, but they cannot extract the value underneath. It is like conquering a bank, only to find out that the vault is time-locked by a computer in Beijing. You can blow up the door, sure, but you will destroy the money inside. This explains the silence from the industry. They have done the due diligence. They have sent their scouts. And the report that came back to Houston was simple. Do not touch this. It is a trap. Let the politicians declare victory. We are staying home. The maritime blockade, the insurance crisis. There is a third layer to this trap, one that almost nobody is talking about, but it is perhaps the most immediate deal-breaker. It involves the invisible engine of global trade, insurance. You cannot move a drop of oil across the ocean without maritime insurance. An oil tanker carries hundreds of millions of dollars of cargo. If it sinks or spills oil, the liability is in the billions. No captain will sail, and no port will allow a ship to dock without a certificate from a P&I Club protection and indemnity. These clubs are mostly based in London. They are governed by strict international maritime law. Right now, Lloyd's of London and the major P&I clubs have effectively red-listed Venezuelan ports. Why? Because of the legal uncertainty we just discussed. The tanker loads oil from a terminal that is legally claimed by Russia, or if the cargo is technically collateral for a Chinese loan, that ship becomes a target for legal seizure. It could be arrested in the Panama Canal. It could be impounded in Rotterdam. Insurance companies hate uncertainty. They are not going to insure a cargo that is essentially stolen property in the eyes of half the world. So they are refusing to issue coverage. Or they are charging war risk premiums that are so high they wipe out any potential profit margin. This creates a maritime blockade without a single warship firing a shot. Trump can order the U.S. Navy to escort the tankers. But he cannot force a private insurance underwriter in London to sign a policy. And without that policy, the commercial fleet stays in the harbor. The oil stays in the tanks. The tanks fill up, and eventually, production has to shut down because there is nowhere to put the oil. This is the boring, unsexy reality of how the global economy actually works. It is not about flags. It is about insurance certificates. And right now, Venezuela is uninsurable. Trump's plan be the dilemma. Now, let's look at this from Donald Trump's perspective. He is a businessman. He understands leverage, but he is currently in a position of zero leverage. His entire plan for the intervention, the sales pitch he gave to the American people, was based on the premise that oil revenue would pay the bills. We will take the oil, he said. It will be a great deal, he said. But the bill is running up every hour. The logistics of an occupation, the naval deployment, the humanitarian aid packages to keep the population from starving. It costs billions of dollars a month. Trump promised that this would not be another Iraq. He promised it would not be a forever war funded by U.S. debt. He promised that Venezuela would pay for its own liberation. But if big oil refuses to pump, who pays? There is no oil revenue coming in. The Venezuelan state is bankrupt. The central bank is empty. So the burden falls 100% on the U.S. Treasury. On you, the taxpayer. This puts Trump in a brutal dilemma. He has two choices, and both are bad. Choice A. The subsidy route. He can try to bribe the oil companies to go in. He can offer them state guarantees. He can say, if Russia sues you, the U.S. government will pay the fine. If China seizes your ships, the U.S. Navy will protect you. If you lose money, we will bail you out. This essentially means nationalizing the risk. It means the U.S. taxpayer is insuring ExxonMobil against geopolitical warfare. It is corporate welfare on a massive scale. It is political suicide. But it might be the only way to get the pumps moving. Choice B. The escalation route. He can try to force the issue. He can declare the Russian and Chinese contracts odious debt. This is a legal concept that says a debt incurred by a dictator against the interests of the people is not valid. He can try to wipe the slate clean by executive decree. All Russian and Chinese assets are hereby null and void. This sounds strong. It sounds like something Trump would do. But the consequences would be catastrophic. If the U.S. cancels sovereign contracts, it breaks the trust in the global financial system. China would retaliate. They could dump U.S. treasuries, spiking interest rates. Russia would retaliate. They could seize Western assets in Europe. It would trigger a global financial war that would make the 2008 crisis look like a picnic. And the oil companies know this. They know that choice B leads to chaos, so they are betting that Trump is bluffing. They're folding their arms and waiting. This is a standoff between the White House and Wall Street. Trump needs the oil to flow to save his political face. Wall Street needs legal certainty to save their profit margins. And right now, nobody is blinking. The internal war. This brings us to the most ironic part of this entire saga. The real war for Venezuela is not being fought in the jungles. It is not being fought between U.S. Marines and Venezuelan guerrillas. It is being fought in conference rooms in Washington, D.C. and New York City. It is an internal war within the American power structure. On one side, you have the ideologues. The politicians, the generals, the hawks. They see the world in terms of maps, flags, and military bases. They think that planting a flag on a hill means you own the hill. On the other side, you have the realists, the bankers, the CEOs, the risk analysts. They see the world in terms of contracts, liabilities, and return on investment (ROI). They know that planting a flag means nothing if you do untone the mineral rights underneath it and you untained insure the truck that carries the minerals away. For the last 30 years, these two groups have mostly been on the same page. U.S. foreign policy opened doors, and U.S. corporations walked through them. It was a symbiotic relationship, but Venezuela has broken that relationship. For the first time, the corporations are refusing to follow the flag. They are saying, "Your foreign policy is too risky for our business model. You messed up the execution. You didn't check the legal paperwork before you sent in the aircraft carriers." This silent revolt is a historic moment. It signals a fracture in the American empire. When the commercial interests no longer trust the military capabilities to secure a profit, the whole system starts to crumble. Because without the economic extraction, the military expansion is just a cost, a massive, bleeding expense with no return. And that is exactly what Venezuela is becoming for Trump. A money pit, a black hole that swallows dollars and credibility. So, as you watch the news clips of soldiers distributing food in Caracas, as you hear the speeches about freedom and democracy, remember to look at what is not happening. Look at the stock tickers of the major energy companies. Look at the shipping logs of the supertankers. They are staying away. They are voting with their feet. And their vote is no confidence. Donald Trump may have won the election. He may have won the military campaign. But he is losing the economic war. And he is losing it to his own side. Because, in the end, American capitalism is not loyal to a president. It is not loyal to a flag. It is loyal to profit. And right now, there is no profit in Venezuela. Only poison. Only traps. Only a tangled web of Russian law and Chinese debt that no amount of Marines can untangle. The question is, how long can Trump sustain this victory before the bill comes due? How long before the American taxpayer realizes they bought a lemon? A broken country that we cannot fix, cannot exploit, and cannot leave. Resonance point. This leaves us with a fundamental question about the future of American power. Do you think U.S. taxpayers should foot the bill to secure oil fields for private companies? Should the government guarantee the profits of Exxon and Chevron against Russian lawsuits? Or should big oil take the risk themselves? If they want the oil, shouldn't they be the ones fighting the legal battles? It seems like we privatize the profits, but we socialize the geopolitical risk. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Is big oil being smart, or are they betraying the national interest? Let me know in the comments below. And if you think this financial trap is bad, in the next video, we're going to look deeper into the Chinese response. we will analyze the Beijing Bill, the specific list of assets China is preparing to seize if the U.S. defaults on the Venezuelan debt. It includes assets you use every day. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching.